episode, we'll review the expansion to Scythe, Rise of Fenris, provided to us from my Stonemeyer Games. Welcome to Wisco Dice! Hey yo folks, I am your host, the Conesy with the Most, and I am joined today by...
Hey, I'm Suzanne. And we're going to go through and give you our impressions of the campaign expansion for Scythe called Rise of Fenris that was provided to us by Stonemeyer Games.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Stonemeyer Games, for providing us a review copy. We do really appreciate that for hours of play and fun at the table, going through the campaign mode and experiencing all of that. Of course, this is going to be a review of a campaign game. There will be spoilers at some point in this review. We're going to provide a no spoiler portion of the review here to start, and then when we go into our spoilers, we will let you know.
You've been warned.
Before we get into the review itself, though, what should folks do?
Oh, you should definitely smash that like button because you know you're going to enjoy this video.
Absolutely. And of course, don't forget to leave a comment in the comments below about what your thoughts are of Rise of Fenris or Scythe if you've had a chance to play these games. With that, let's go ahead and get into our review of the Rise of Fenris.
We were lucky. We had two friends that were willing to play this. We could play to experience it as a 4-player game, and we knocked it out in basically 4 weeks.
I mean, Scythe is a game we definitely recommend you play it between 3 to 5 players. Yes. We don't necessarily, even though you can get an expansion that extends it to up to 7 players, it's not necessarily our favorite way to play the game. Where Rise of Fenris comes in is it allows you to consume Rise of Fenris in a couple of different ways. First and foremost is the 8-game campaign mode. That is kind of, I think, the way it presents itself is wanting to be played. And when you open the box, you're going to see lots of special boxes that you don't know what the contents are that are in, that are kind of exciting. Like, ooh, when do I get to open up those? When do I get to experience those components?
Yes.
You get excited, kind of get excited about that because those are things you're going to get to open up and unlock as you play through the campaign. Of course, it's also a replayable campaign, so if you'd ever, if you want to play it a second time, you can, or if you want to play with a different group, you can.
It actually encourages that. It's got, like, one of those achievement sheets, so, like, the first campaign, what did you do, and...
I personally think your group's going to have to really love Scythe, and really, really love Scythe, in order for that to be a way you consume it, and I'm sure there are players out there that do. I think our initial take, when we talk about the campaign mode of Rise of Fenris, one playthrough was more than enough for us, and we'll talk more about that in our spoilers side of it, and why there was definitely, okay, we're just going through the motions to finish this. We kind of know who's going to win. And we want to experience all of the components for the review, all of the play of the campaigns. We didn't call it early, but it was definitely, it almost felt like work by the end, which is not, I'm going to say, of the campaign games I've played, not my favorite way to experience this or experience a campaign. And there are some reasons why. But I'll just say that I feel like there was a significant lack of player agency or player decision making. My decisions did not really impact the ability or the outcome of the campaign.
Yeah. So one thing to note is that if you didn't catch it earlier on, is that you do need the base game of Scythe to play the campaign. Mm-hmm. This is an expansion that adds a campaign if you want to.
Absolutely.
But you can also just buy it for the expansion content.
Yes.
And basically, and it has a way that you can, if you just open up these boxes, punch these boards, and here are the rules to play with the expansion content if you don't want to go through the campaign.
When you say, okay, now, Conesy, it doesn't sound like you want to play this campaign. And I'm going to say, like, if you're a big Scythe fan and you got a bunch of Scythe fans that enjoy playing Scythe and you get together and you play Scythe and you just want to play, or have an extra reason to play Scythe, this campaign is a great way to do it. It will add to the fun, give you a little bit extra oomph, but you're basically playing 8 games of Scythe.
Yep.
What's there is absolute real value for the price point to buy this for its stand and just use it as standalone content as an expansion to Scythe. If you wanted to just take those normal 8 plays of games and just play just regular 8 players of games and ignore the whole campaign element, or if you just wanted it to add to your side to give you more choices or more options in your upcoming games aside, it's absolutely worth it.
Finish
it's
the
a
collection.
Great, well, not just it's not. I mean, if you're a collector and you have to own everything, there's that.
It's worth it to do that.
But there are things that will easily be incorporated into your regular games of Scythe that you will want to have this. It gives you more options.
Oh yes. I am very glad that we have it to add, because there are definitely elements that I'm
definitely looking forward to the next time we play Scythe, to being able to be, hey guys, we have some of these components that you can add, that we're going to add into the game that you wouldn't normally get to experience.
Yep. So that's definitely cool. And the quality of the components in the expansion, same as what's in the other expansions in the base game. You cannot tell. Don't
expect anything like completely new. There were a couple of nice things, like there are some things that were originally Kickstarter exclusives, like combat dials, etc., that you don't, that potentially are in the expansion. So if if you were like, oh hey, I have all the bling from the Kickstarter editions, you expect those bling components for anything that comes in the expansion without leaving spoilers.
Yeah. All right. So let's, before we go into the why do you like Scythe?
From a gameplay experience, it's a interesting economic / territory control / this historical reenactment game on the table, which it provides a lot of strategy with all these asymmetric factions and faction abilities, but really straightforward. Like, learning how to play a game of Scythe is very easy to teach.
Yes.
Because you're basically going to choose one of 4 actions on your turn, and then you may be able to do a bottom action that corresponds with that top action. But everything is well designed from an asymmetry perspective. Although I do find a little bit sometimes, because you have a top board and a bottom board, sometimes you'll find that what your faction wants to do, your faction wants to do versus the player board, where it has the actions that you can do, may not necessarily align well, and that can sometimes lend itself to a challenging game experience.
Yes, which is one of the things I do enjoy about Scythe, is that I can be like, I love a certain faction, and that's a faction I want to play and I feel good at, but then it mixes it up with having different player boards, or, so the replay. I like the replayability. I like the asymmetry or asymmetrical factions and everything with the game. So,
but what did you think of Rise of Fenris? Because Scythe, I think we both really like. Like, Scythe itself, we really like. And Rise of Fenris, I think I've already kind of said what I think of the campaign mode, but I really like the box content to add to my normal games of Scythe. What did you think of Rise of Fenris, just generally speaking, from the campaign mode?
It's basically the same as how Conesy was viewing it. It was definitely something I want to include in future gameplays. There were some challenges to my normal play style. It was a tough campaign for me. I love Scythe. I'm not great at Scythe. It is a more challenging game for me than a lot of them. So this definitely stretched me, and I had to just be okay with losing and be okay with that. And it was fine for me. I do not. Some people think I'm very competitive, but I do not have to win every game to enjoy it.
No, but if there's a reason to attack, you will.
When I get to play with it. I will say, I think the Rise of Fenris, if you have certain people that are more experienced with Scythe and have favorite factions, and then you have people that have never played Scythe before playing Rise of Fenris, I think that can make it a little lopsided feeling, at least initially, because
and we'll talk a little bit more in detail why that is
but that's the
in
same
our
as
spoilers.
But that's also the same as if you're playing a Scythe game in general.
Yes.
So
why
those
that's
things,
magnified in the campaign we'll talk about.
Yeah, I think that's my biggest thing before you get into spoilers is just
try
realize
to make sure
that, or have everyone be on the same level.
Yeah,
or
trying to make sure everybody is at kind of the same level of skill going into your Rise of Fenris campaign is going to make a big amount of difference.
Yeah. So anyway, I think now is the time that we're going to splash that spoiler alert on the screen.
Spoilers! Let's talk actually, like, now you can see the components. We're into the box. We can actually talk about the components now and what you get in the box. There's a bunch of new cardboard tokens, and the cardboard's the same quality cardboard tokens that are going to basically allow you to get different types of upgrades and special powers. Most of those cardboard components represent.
Yep, the modifications.
There's also 2 new factions in the box.
Yes.
Now these factions don't allow you to extend the player count more than 7, which is cool.
No, but you don't want to.
You probably like we
said. If you're in the middle of a campaign, you don't want to extend it.
But it gives you the nice thing with these additional factions is it gives you more variety for when you play games of Scythe for factions to pick from. And again, we talked about Scythe. This game we like to play between 3 to 5 players. Actually, 4 to 5 is kind of our sweet spot, I think.
4 to 5 is nice because when you're on the board, it's harder for someone to be completely isolated and not have any interaction with another player. So, and it's a little bit easier to kind of work together to block a certain player's abilities, but also, so these 2 new factions, they don't have spots on the base board, but based on what other people select, they have special little tiles that you cover up other factions that are not chosen, which is good, but you want these players to pick those spots last, obviously after everyone else has picked their faction, but these 2 factions play really differently than the other factions in the base game and the Visitors from Afar expansion. They play very differently. One is kind of a fighty, like, attack everyone whether they want to or not. The Fenris faction is, and the Vesna faction is, gosh, every time you play that, you can set it up slightly differently.
Yeah, because you're getting 3 one-use only factory cards, and factory cards are basically one-use only cards for that
faction. Yes, and so they have them from the beginning. So if they even never go to the factory spot, they have factory cards.
Yeah, so yes, it adds like unique additional ways to play the game and additional variety, which is really good. And getting 2 new factions in this box, plus the extra content of the box, puts it in comparison to an expansion like Visitors from Afar that gives you 2 new factions that have pre-printed spaces on the board, right?
Yep.
So it gives you more variety for what you're going to select from factions in your games of Scythe. So it's when we talk about the value of what does this game add, or what does this expansion add to your games of Scythe, your like normal games of Scythe, that's exactly what we're talking about. So that's really cool. Plus we get the whole campaign mode as well. And when we talk about campaign mode, this is where I think some guidance is going to be needed. So let's talk a little bit about how we ran through the campaign mode, and we wanted to do. I kind of selected who we invited to play this campaign based on some factors. I wanted some experienced players, some really experienced players, and I would call myself and one of our other play testers experienced with Scythe players, but also hadn't played. Yeah, you had experience, but I don't know that you've played it as many times as you've played it a few times, but not as many times.
At least 5 times before we started the campaign.
Okay, experienced players. Okay, I did not think you played it that many times. I'm sorry.
I have.
I also wanted to invite one player who I didn't think had ever played Scythe before. And so we had a new player playing Scythe for the first time going through this campaign. Now, in hindsight, I don't think that is anything I would ever recommend you do to have a fun campaign game experience like this. In fact, I would never recommend bringing a new player into a campaign that is competitive, because they're going to be behind the 8 ball a bit, generally speaking, versus the experienced players who know what to expect.
Yeah. And the rules actually do state that if you have someone who's never played Scythe before, it's suggested they play a couple games before they start the campaign.
Mm-hmm.
We'll let them watch a video on how to play.
Why is that important?
Well, because when you win in the campaign, you get a little bit extra bonus in your rewards compared to everyone else.
And it's not game-breakingly significant, but
it does kind of add up.
It does stack over time, absolutely.
Yep. So it definitely does, especially when there's, some randomness to some of the bonuses, that it's like, oh, if you get a choice between 2 or you get a choice between 3, that definitely pulling that extra 1 can be a benefit.
So over our campaign experience of 8 games, so 8 plays, we had 1 player win 6 of those 8 plays.
Yep.
And by the end of the campaign, that player was effectively unstoppable. Although by technicality, I did win the final game, so I won 2 of the other games. Nobody else won any.
Nope. And we tried.
Yeah, I don't think we were all ganging up against this one player at several of the plays.
Yep.
Trying to stop them. They just, because of these incremental little things, that they were getting better. And no knocking. This player was also our other experienced player who is very good at Scythe.
And one of the things, though, that does help is at certain points when a new faction is introduced, that goes to that player plus some bonuses. So the goals for that episode in the game do favor that new faction that was introduced, because that's part of how the storyline of the campaign is going.
Mm-hmm.
So real quick, when you do play this game, though, you need to read the flavor text to help understand the storyline. And that also helps you understand how to play each campaign a bit, which these new factions fit into.
So how does this campaign work?
So works like most other campaigns, where you have your setup, you're going to read the flavor text, which gives you some background in what's going on in the world of the game at the moment. And then it's going to introduce whatever the new slight rule changes are for the game, give you your end goals, and then you set off and play the game. When the game end trigger for that episode is reached, sometimes it's just the standard, hey, you need to get 6 stars and then it ends. Sometimes it's you get 6 stars or you complete this other objective, and then that game will end. You read some more flavor text about hey, now this is what's going on now that you did X, Y, and Z. And then you get your bonuses that set you up, hopefully, for the next episode. So that's basically how it goes.
Exactly. Now, where this campaign is different than virtually any other campaign game I've played,
same with me,
is this is a very linear campaign. Yeah. And there is very little player choice in the direction the story will go. In fact, there's basically no player choice.
Yeah, there's one time you have choice between 2.
There's one time where you're going to vote which way you go, which scenario you're going to play, based on vote tokens that you collect in the game previous. Mm-hmm. And then, guess what? The choice you didn't take, you will end up playing later. Yeah. So, it really didn't allow for any kind of player agency. Rather, what this campaign does is it sets up a story of 8 games that you're going to play back to back, basically, that have narrative story elements to them, which is why you said you want to if you want to experience it and feel like you're playing an immersive story, you need to read
it. I mean, it's not long; it's a couple paragraphs.
It gives because it gives you that background of, oh, hey, these are these events that are happening in the world, but the gameplay itself is basically 8 games of Scythe, with your outcomes of those games not impacting the story, but rather impacting what your next, like what starting things you might get for the next game, or what special new upgrades you get as a faction, those kind of tidbits.
Yep.
By spending money that you basically, because the way you win inside is whoever has the most money at the end wins the most wealth. And so now you're taking that wealth that you won in the previous game and spending it for upgrades, spending it for pre-game bonuses, and various other things that you're allowed to spend your money on.
Yep. And spend your money.
Yeah, and spend it. There's no reason to keep it throughout the campaign. Spend it if you got it.
Spend it.
And so this is another thing that sets up that person who's winning, if they continue to win strongly and other players aren't, and the wins don't get spread around in your games, what will end up happening is that player ultimately continues to have more and more money. So when they're getting upgrades, they're able to just buy the upgrades, versus like there were rounds where I would get past the upgrade tokens that you'd get to select from that round and be like, I can't afford to buy any of these. Sorry.
Same with me. And it did.
And that does definitely, like, all of a sudden, because some of those upgrades are like, hey, you can do the building action and not have to pay the resource costs, or you can do the build a mech action and not have to pay the resource costs. And those were ridiculously powerful abilities, and also they're randomly dealt out. So you don't even have the chance necessarily. Like, there were certain abilities that I never had a chance to get or ever saw that might have been really strong to counteract some of my faction's weaknesses.
And you can't double up on it. Like, if you already have the ability that gives you a free build action basically once per game, if you end up drawing that again at the end of another game from the bag, well, you can't buy that. Mm-hmm. And so there was at least one game where I had money to buy something, but both of the upgrades that I drew, I had. So I couldn't buy anything, which was just really, really hurt.
Yeah.
It's like I didn't get any upgrades. I did okay this game, but I can't improve how it's going and stuff.
And so that ultimately what we experienced was really a landslide in one player's favor, because they were able to win so many games. And you could say, hey, well, why didn't the rest of you maybe step up? There was a point where we all kind of realized this after he won his second or third game. We started to realize this, and as we were allowed to reselect factions, move around the board, we started trying to do things as a group. Like, all three of us tried to do things, and it would just be like, he would tally up his points at the end of the game and be like, oh, I just scored 80. I just scored 80.
Yeah.
80 points or whatever.
Crazy,
like,
because he might
the
not
next
have
best
even
player
had the
was
most
like 60.
stars. Yeah. But the first faction that I picked was a faction that I enjoyed playing a lot of times, but it did not work well with the campaign for me with what the other players had.
We all ended up being crammed together, all four of us together, with the player who won on one edge and the other player, and then the two of you kind of sandwiched between us with no room other than to go through us to...
Yep, and I was not a faction that was great at fighting early in the game. And I needed to expand, but then I would keep losing.
And the factions were dealt randomly, if I remember right, at the beginning.
I think we did the factions randomly at the beginning. So then when we had an opportunity to change, I picked a new one, but there was only a couple options.
And then everybody got sandwiched again together. So.
And then, but then I did opt to, every time I had the opportunity to change factions, I did.
And I didn't. I never changed factions throughout the campaign. I probably should have, because I think the faction I had is one of the like factions that maybe struggles a little more in regular games. But I was consistently scoring like 60,
well.
65 points every game. It just got to a point that the other player was scoring 80 and I could never catch up.
And the nice thing for where Conesy's faction was possibly later in the game is he could do his own thing and no one could really interfere with him.
Mm-hmm.
But it was also very difficult for him to move forward and stop someone else from doing it. He was ended up being very isolated, but he could get his machine going and his engine just chugging along. And if it was a normal game of Scythe, I think, where we didn't have these extra goals with the campaign, you would have done really well because we just couldn't kind of touch you.
Ultimately, what did we think of Rise of Fenris?
There's a couple things that I really enjoyed about this with the game is the flavor text having that story. So I like that. I also like that you can learn to play a faction really well. If that's something you like to do, that's great. I think it's a good value to get this and add it to your campaign because the 2 new factions just
to your collection, right?
To your collection. Sorry, to your collection, not to your campaign. But the 2 new factions really add to it for me. I really like the Fenris faction. And when you play the game, and if you know me, you will probably figure out why.
They're very attacky oriented.
They are, and it doesn't matter. You're like, you almost want to get defeated sometimes with that one. But of course, people weren't defeating me when I needed them to. So I do like that. I wasn't as excited about it being a very linear campaign. That I like when things change. I like having choices. I like having variety to how the game is going to play out. Like what's the end game condition? What are the goals? If we didn't uncover something, I want it to impact us as we go through it. So like if we didn't find the thing we were supposed to find or uncover it, I want that to impact us more. So, but I don't think it's a waste of money to go get this.
No,
at all.
So a couple of observations from it. If you're looking at this to provide a unique campaign experience for you and your group as an extra reason to play Scythe, I think you're going to quickly be reminded of a couple of the negative things over the course of this game reasons that I really like Scythe, but also the reasons I don't have problems
all
with
the
Scythe.
time.
And that is the number one reason is that the game end trigger in Scythe is getting 6 stars. When the first player to do that ends the game. Period. Done. Nobody. It's not even player turns. Nothing like that.
No.
And what I ended up getting reminded of me really early in this campaign, in like the first 3 or 4 games, was there were a couple of games where if I'd have had just one more turn, I'd have been really close to winning or within a point or 2 of winning. Yeah. And it would have stayed very close between myself and the player who won the campaign ultimately. Instead, I was on the back end of that I didn't get an even number of turns. And that became very apparent to me as I played through the campaign. And then as those differences continued to grow for the player who won the campaign because of the extra money and things like that they were being able, and the extra little scenario rewards and stuff like that they were getting, it widened that gap further and made that even feel more punishing when you didn't get an even number of turns. The other aspect of this that I did not necessarily get super excited about was the lack of player agency in terms of the campaign mode.
Yes.
It was very much, you're a concept in role-playing games of railroading a group or a party through an experience, and that's exactly what this campaign does. It railroads you. The only thing that matters is how well you do in the games. And the random luck of what upgrades you can get to draw when it's your turn to draw upgrades. And I think those two, it's only 8 games, so it doesn't get too exponentially bad, But if you have one player who tends to win and win a lot, it's basically like, all about them, and it doesn't matter what the rest of you do for like the second 4 games in the campaign.
Yep, right.
And if it wasn't for the fact that in the last game that the player, like the reason I won the last game versus him winning it was the fact that he was trying. There is a like what you get stars for are recorded at the bottom of your campaign sheet, and that factors into how well you did at the end of the campaign and whether you won or lost the campaign. And so he was more focused on filling in some of those things that he didn't have checked off than he was in trying to win the game. This is the only game in the entire campaign where he was more worried about getting those than worried about winning, which is why I technically won the final game, even though he won the campaign.
Yeah.
So that said, like I said, those additional expansion or the additional factions are so cool and unique. I really like the way Vesna and Fenris both work, and that they are, and aesthetically they're different too.
Oh yes, definitely.
I really liked some of the other little campaign surprises that were in it. They're like Tesla and the way he bounced around the board.
Yes,
like, I think that would be cool to add to like a normal game of Scythe and just have like this. I mean, it could be really bad for somebody too, but at the same time,
it was really bad for me, but that was okay. He sent me back home when I wasn't ready to go back home.
Yeah. Because he can attack you when you're not ready to.
I guess that is one of the things is that Mad Tesla is working for one thing, the Fenris faction is working for one thing, the Vesna faction is working for one thing, but in the game they're all working against each other. Where I think the Mad Tesla and the Fenris faction, I think those are the two that were Mad Tesla and the Vesna faction should have kind of been. One of them should have been like immune to the effects of it because they're working towards the same goal. And one of them,
Tesla wasn't working. Tesla didn't care. Like Vesna was Tesla's daughter, but he didn't like at that point. He'd been captured too long or whatever. He was just pissed off or whatever.
Yeah, there was
there was a narrative reason. Anyways, if you really like Scythe and you've went down the rabbit hole of collecting the other stuff. There's some really good stuff in here and a good reason to add this to your Scythe collection. Would we recommend it playing it as a campaign mode? I would say generally no, but there's caveats to that, and you need to read your own player group or who you're going to have play this campaign with you and realize the limitations of a campaign, it being a very linear campaign that's really focused on what you do in-game and how you approach that component of it towards the overall Scythe experience.
Yep.
All right. I think that concludes our review of Scythe, Rise of Fenris.
All right. Until next time, then.
Yeah, until next time. Thanks for watching. We appreciate it. Have a good one. Hey there, it's Conesy. Thank you so much for watching. We put out videos weekly here at Wisco Dice. Check out our channel for more great videos, and don't forget to subscribe. We also have more great content on our website at wiscodice.com. Of course, we do this all for you, the viewers. So please like the video if you enjoyed it, and thanks for watching.